I'm giving you guys a Kashtira Masterclass. I will show you how I took this deck during a format where everyone thought it was dead, that it didn't do anything, and I managed through playtesting. I went through several locals. I didn't do so hot. Then I started improving my deck list, seeing what works, what doesn't. Of course, after a Rise Heart was banned, and I finally came down to a certain list and got top 32 at the YCS. After that, I saw tremendous success in my in local scene, winning local after local. I think I had like a 6 local streak. So that was pretty good, over 20, 30 people. I won a big locals of over 90 people twice. Then I went on to win a regional. And since then, again, still doing very well with the deck. Even though now we have a tier 0 fire format, I'm still having success with the deck. So I'm going to show you the way I play the deck, side deck strategies, the way that you should be thinking when you're playing the deck, combos that I do, and cards that are mandatory, I feel. Because the deck goes through like certain changes, but since my top 32 YCS, I feel like certain things are set in stone, right? Like the rest could change, but the majority of the deck can stay the same. So I'm gonna talk about everything, and this is gonna be one video that has all the information, everything that you need to have success with the deck. And I think I'm gonna try to make this as future-proof as possible. So of course, if some cards get hit, then that's a different story. But I think this is a good video for anyone that likes Kashtira to, soak in a lot of knowledge and perform well with the deck. So first things first, I'm gonna start with the mandatory cards, right? So of course, we're gonna play 3 Fenrir. Keep in mind, this is probably one of your main interactions that this deck has. So although like people think, oh, whatever, yeah, it's just 3 Fenrir, but sometimes you have to make sure that you even end on 2, because now the deck, again, it doesn't have the Arise Heart, so it's like the interactions are very limited. Sometimes ending on double Fenrir is better than ending on Fenrir Unicorn, just because your opponent could easily like attack over one or try to get rid of one, and then if they're faced with 2, then the Fenrir interaction could get you there. So you definitely have to play 3 Fenrir, right? This is not going to be a deck profile. It's just going to be more of the cards that are mandatory. Of course, 3 Unicorn, one of your 1-card starters, right? So that's really, really cool. I think this card now being back to 3 and the interaction that it has to rip an extra deck card is so, so important. And like one of the biggest things that this deck has like going for itself too is that, well, number one, above all, they're all huge, right? All your Kashtira monsters are really big, right? And they're inherent summons. So these cards, even if they get negated, they're very powerful. And their second effects, right? The effect to rip cards or banish a card face down is really, really, really powerful. So it basically means that they have an inherent advantage over other cards like Tour Guide, let's say, right? If someone normal summons Tour Guide and it gets negated, you can't really do much with the body, right? Unless you have like a level 3 extender and whatever. Where these cards, you could like summon them, get hand trapped, and pass, and that could still get you there. So I think the interaction that Unicorn has, going back to its interaction, I think this is one of the most unique effects in the game. And hitting certain crucial parts in your opponent's extra deck can definitely get you there. And the fact that after you use Unicorn, that they won't have that card in their deck for the rest of the duel is huge, right? Pretend your opponent has a very important one of that they need to get to do their crazy full combo. You hitting that card, you dramatically lower their ceiling. And that's what this card does, is you lower your opponent's ceiling. And keep that in mind, because I'm going to repeat that a lot throughout this video, is lowering your opponent's ceiling. So these cards could hit certain one-of cards that your opponent will need to raise their ceiling and get to their full combo or do the crazy part that their deck does. So Unicorn is very important in that sense, and I think that's overlooked a lot. Now, another mandatory card, and I think this is like the skeleton, right, that never changes, is the 3 Rise Heart. Even back then, right, that this deck was tier 0. Not tier 0, but like it was like the best deck. Some people played 1, some people played 2, and they saw success with it. And then Jeremy Mitchell and a lot of other players, they played 3. And they realized that, you know what? This deck has a problem with consistency. And this is one of the other cards that we could potentially bump up and have higher consistency. So playing 3, in my opinion, is almost mandatory and shouldn't be cut any less, right? However, this is very, very important. Going second into a crazy combo deck, or a deck that, you know, puts up a billion negates or manadiums, or, you know, decks like that, you always, always, always side one out. Now, that's only for going second. If you're playing against a control deck, you keep it in because you want to keep max consistency. Now, if you're going against like a crazy combo deck, you know your extenders, like this card is kind of like an extender, but only if you have a cash monster on board. You know you need to see a board breaker. You know you need to see a hand trap. So you kind of need to lower your consistency a tad to see a utility card. And this is the only card and another card that you could take out, and a card that you don't really want to see going into an established board, right? I want to see Fenrir. I want to see Unicorn. I don't really want to see Rice Heart going into an established board. So I think 3 is super safe in the main, right? Because it's a 50% going first. It's 50% chance you're going to go first, 50% chance you're going to go second. And therefore, you don't know what you're playing. You don't know if you're playing against a Cabo deck or a control deck, right? So I think it's safe to play 3. And then post-siding, you really sculpt your deck to, you know, going first or going second. But yep, I think this card is absolutely mandatory at 3. It also fuels your preparations, which I will repeat again later on, which is another part that I think is really, really important. Now, Scareclaw Kashtira is a card that helps you out multiple cards in the format, you know, cards that can be they have like crazy effect, right? You can negate them by attacking them with your cash cards. It's also an extender, right? It's part of your combo. And in my opinion, the best effect is that it banishes a cash card from your graveyard, right? So that's really, really cool. With Theosis and preparations, you get to put more cards on the board, add more cards to your hand. To be honest, I think that effect comes up way more than the effect to negate a card. So I actually love that part, the banishing from the hand or the grave. I feel like it comes up almost, maybe not turn 0, but turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, I feel like it comes up. And I sometimes I'm looking for a second Scareclaw Cash, but I realize it's already banished or it's already in the grave. So this card could really help you get back into the game. Then, this is the one that everyone tells me not to play, but I need to talk about this card in depth. So look, let's put the basics down, right? Let's put the facts down. It's a 2800 beat stick, right? You could just slap it on the board and it's 2800. That's already like amazing, even though you think it's not, right? Because it's an extra cash monster in your deck. So it combos with Rise Heart, it combos with Theosis, right? So keep that in mind. I think that's really, really important to note. The fact that it's a big body and it can punch over a card, that's amazing. It's kind of like Mech Knights, right? Like Mech Knights back in the day, you get to special summon purple or blue, and you could attack over a card and you're going +1. So this is kind of the same thing. The fact that it searches you this card is even better. And if you have Pressured Planet on the board, this card becomes over 3000 most of the times, right? Because there's not going to be just waters on the board. So this is probably my favorite one, and I think the best card, one of the best cash monsters, you know, obviously besides Fenrir and Unicorn. Now the effect to look at your opponent's top 5 and banish a card face down is either game winning or it's going to help you lower your opponent's ceiling. Now you realize that most decks play cards at 2, you know, or certain combo cards they have to play at 1 of, right? Or they play certain cards at 3, right? Of course. Now, if I look at my opponent's top 5 cards, it depends on the scenario that I'm in, right? If I attack and I see we're in a simplified game state, which happens more often than people think, because people are hyper fixated on turn 0, but they don't really think about the mid game and the late game. and this card is definitely a mid to late game card, and you need to have those cards in your deck. I digress. If you see your opponent's top 5 cards and you're in the grind game, you seeing the next card they're gonna draw is huge. So you could control which card they're gonna draw from the top 2 cards of their deck. I think that's insane, right? So even if it's a decent card that they get, you know to play around it, which again, it could be game winning. It's kind of like when you talents and look at their hand, right? Another thing is, lowering your opponent's ceiling by hitting certain one-ofs. There's been a lot of times where, and I feel like I need to talk about this too. These cards, right? They have a hidden ability, which is, like I said before, with this, lowering your opponent's ceiling. Now, there's been so many games, and I know if you play Cash, it's definitely happened to you where you've used Rise Heart, and then your opponent's like, oh, dang, look what you banished face down, or dang, I banished this face down, this sucks, right? I can't do my combo. Or like they go to search for another target in their deck, even if it's a 3-of, right? You'll go into the grind game and they'll be like, oh, it's banished face down because of Rise Heart. How many times has that happened to you? I feel like that happens often, right? Because 3 cards is significant. And if you summon multiple, like let's say on your next turn and you banish another 3, it's like resources that your opponent like didn't get into yet, but potentially would want to get into later on. Same thing with Ogre. So seeing the top 5 and hitting a 1-of or hitting a certain crucial card that you know is going to come up in the mid game can be game winning, right? So these cards, besides being combo pieces, besides being like big bodies, they also have that hidden ability to lower your opponent's ceiling. Now, in my opinion, and the reason why I love this deck so much is because I consider all these cards win conditions, right? It's a bit of a stretch, I understand, but if you think about it, and it's definitely happened to me before, I might as well talk about this card too. I consider all these cards, because these are the main cash cards, right? I consider all these cards win conditions, as well as Shangri Era. Now, if you think about it, if these cards go unchecked, right? Specifically these, if they go unchecked for a turn, you're pretty much winning the game, right? Because if Fenrir doesn't get answered and it sticks on the board, which happens, right, depending on what your opponent opened, depending on like the way you interacted with them, on the following turn, you're going to get another search. And that other search is going to get into another card, right? So, and that's, you gain so much advantage of cards you use from the previous turn. And in my opinion, those are the best types of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, right? Same thing with Unicorn. It could be a literal win condition if it sticks on the board for more than one turn. And now what's broken, especially about Unicorn, is it also gets into Birth, which again, could be another win condition, as well as having the same effect that these three have, that these three have, which is lowering your opponent's ceiling and getting rid of resources for the rest of the duel. Preparation does it too, but it's with a trap effect. Although it doesn't come up that often, when it does come up, you're definitely winning the game because you're looking at their hand and you're banishing a card face down, kind of like a win condition. And then Shangri Era, I know people were laughing when I was doing it at the YCS. They were saying like, oh, he was just going Shang and pass. He was shanging and baking, which it sounds funny, but just ending on this card and then getting access to, like, let's say another cash monster. If they don't answer this card, and if they try to destroy it, you get detachment material, so they're gonna have to find another way to get rid of it. But they know that if they don't, right, you're getting access to another monster on the following turn, right? I think that's just insane. And then these cards getting into more cards. Literally, these cards are all win conditions. Same thing with Birth, right? If they don't answer Birth, next turn you're going to get access to these cards again. Now, keep in mind, that's if you hard draw these cards, right? Now, picture you having multiple of them, or like, through the game state, you're searching more. It just becomes way too much and way too overwhelming for your opponent. So I think that's why it's a good idea to play this deck, and why I think it will always be good for the longest time. And I think it is future proof unless it gets hit on the ban list. Yeah. And then preparations, just to talk about it a little more, I understand that it's slow. I understand that it's a card that you don't want to see going second. However, it is a cash card that you could search off of Ogre. So I didn't want to play a cash card to search off of Ogre. And Big Bang is just not good right now. It doesn't make any sense to play Big Bang. The combo that it does, you don't need to use the second effect of Big Bang. And the first effect, in my opinion, is just not consistent enough. It's not like relevant enough. And Preparations is one of those cards that could really, really help you in the grind game, in the mid game. You know, especially if you're using cards to banish cards, right? If you're using cards like Dimensional Fissure, if you're using Shifter, if you're using Macrocosmos, if you know you go SP or your opponent goes SP, this is just another birth in a sense that gets you access to your banished Kashtira monsters. What comes up a lot with this card is the fact that you get to put a cash monster on the board without using an effect, and I feel like that comes up so often, especially if your opponent has a Kashtira card. Just in the battle phase, your opponent might not think you have game, and then you use Preparations in the battle phase to special summon a monster from your hand or you're banished, and then get enough for game. So this card could kind of like help you play through Nibiru, and I feel like it comes up almost every single time I play this deck. I don't know, I search this card and I play with this card all the time. Against super heavy combo decks, you take this out. And now Birth, I would say is the best card in the Kashtira deck by miles. The fact that it's like, you get to normal summon your 7s, you get to reborn your 7s from your banisher grave. It's follow-up, it could be an extender, it's, you know, it sticks on the board as an interruption. It helps your Shang lock zones. I think this is the best card in the deck by miles. And if this card gets hit, I think then the deck will struggle a bit. Engine for the monsters, I would consider Shifter to be an engine card. You know, as long as there's not a tier 0 format that the best deck uses the banish zone and stuff, I think this is for sure 3 of in your Kashtira deck. It might as well be a Kashtira card. Sure, right, it could be an auto win. It could also potentially brick, but the risk to reward is definitely there. We've seen, I think it was the Euros, where the guy played a lot of hand traps, but it, you know, it was during Kashtira format, so he didn't main Shifter. I think he sided Shifter. And that just goes to show that, like, you know, in those formats where Kashtira is everywhere, or I'm saying in the future, if there's a deck like Kashtira, maybe you don't main it and you don't consider it a staple in the deck. But if it's not a tier 0 format that has that type of deck as the tier 0 deck, you definitely main this card and you consider this card as a, you know, staple 3 of engine card. Now, Preparations, what is this called? Pressured Planet. Consistency, the fact that it's an additional disruption is gigantic. You know, ending on your Shangra era, popping a card, potentially popping a card during your turn, right? Using your Rise Heart is insane, and I feel that does come up often. You know, just using your Rise Heart, banishing a card from your deck, triggering Planet, locking a zone, and then Pressure Planet, popping a card. Again, if this card sticks on the board, if these two stick on the board for more than a turn, you're popping 2 cards, gaining 2 cards off Shang. It's like almost impossible to lose that game, in my opinion. So I like how this is a 1 card that creates that scenario for you, and probably one of the strongest field spells in the game. Not much else to say there. And then I said the births, right? Theosis. Okay. There are a lot of people that play 2 Theosis, and I agree with you. I think Theosis is on the same wavelength, let's say, as Rise Heart. Now, these are cards that require other cards to be live, and I agree, right? However, you need them to keep consistency in your deck, as well as have a good grind game. Now, Theosis combos with any other Kashtira name, so that's amazing. Except Scareclaw Cash. But it has the same principle as Rise Heart. So if I'm going against a super heavy combo deck, I know I need to see a utility card, and I know it's not realistic for me to put a body on board and then resolve these cards, right? It's just not doable against a deck that resolves a crazy negate combo deck. So I always side these 2 out and keep these 2 in the main. Therefore, I still have decent amount of consistency. However, going into a heavy combo deck, it's likely that I'm not going to see multiples, right? And that's something that I really want to avoid, is definitely seeing multiples of these cards, or even seeing like both of them together is not good. Because for these to be good in my hand, I need my other cash monsters to stick on the board, and that's just too much to ask for when you're going against a board full of negates. Keep in mind, against control decks or slower decks, you keep these in going first or second. So people saying that Theosis is 2 of, I agree with you, but I only agree with you in a certain scenario. So this is something that I've been doing for months now, is that side pattern. So it's cool that you know that these 3 cards are coming out going second against the heavy combo deck. So allowing you to put 3 more utility cards. And then that's it for the Theosis. The grave effect to banish it, to add a card, comes up almost all the time. And I want to note that if you don't have anything to add back off Theosis, what you do is and you don't have access to Birth, is when you summon Rice Heart, for example. Let's say you go Unicorn effect, add Theosis, you Theosis into Fenrir, and then Fenrir adds Rice Heart, right? And then this goes to grave, and you summon your Rice Heart, and here you banish your Birth, right? So this is your grave, this is your field. And then you would overlay these for a simple combo to end on this, and then on their turn you would use Shangri Ears effect. Now, what this does is many things. One, you have your Birth banished and your Theosis established in grave. So on the following turn, if any of these survive, you get access to everything. Also, later on, if you have Scareclaw Cash or if you have any other Rise Hearts, right, you can banish Theosis and add back Birth. And you definitely want to get access to Birth as soon as possible if you don't have access to it. So this sets up Theosis in grave as well as Birth banished. So on the crackback, if these cards survive, you get to banish this and get your Birth, as well as a bunch of other cards. So that's the main combo if you have just Unicorn and how Theosis grave effect comes up. Then the last mandatory card, well, 2 other I would consider engine cards, is Terraforming. You want to see your 1 card planet sets up the whole like Shangri era popping effect, right? And the pseudo win condition. So you definitely just want to bump up the consistency. And then new inclusion into the deck, Paul Arison? Paulie won a YCS with this card in his deck, and he explained how, with Birth, you could just normal summon it, and then you could mill 3, and then if you had any name, you could reborn something. So it's like a slight bump in consistency. However, it's not absolutely mandatory, but in my opinion, you just want to play the game, right? And I think it's one of those cards that just let you play the game. I also really like how it has the effect of Scareclaw Cash, so it's another target in my deck in the mid game for that. So although it looks like fluff, it looks like it's not important, it definitely, if you do the math and you do let's say 1,000 test hands, you having this card in your deck will give you way more playable hands than not. Now I want to talk about potential utility cards that you could play. Now, a lot of people talk about Nibiru, and I feel like this is something I really need to touch on. Even if Nibiru is amazing in the format, it's a card that I will never, ever play in Kashtira. Now, in my opinion, I don't like playing Yu-Gi-Oh cards that could potentially backfire. Now, cards like that are like Summon Limit, cards like that could be like Anti-Spell. Nibiru, right, giving yourself a token can be sometimes very, very hard. And I actually played this card for a few regionals, and it was horrible for me. I made myself brick. Even if I stopped my opponent, normally when you Nibiru your opponent, they will still end on follow-up. It's very rare that your Nibiru is just going to stop them, and then on the next turn, they're not going to have anything. I feel like that doesn't happen, right? So if you Nibiru and you cannot play, that is horrible. That is really, really bad. Even under, I like how under Shifter or like Dimensional Fissure, you could, like, all the cards get banished, so your preparations and Birth can bring them back, but it's like a weird scenario, right? Your opponent's not gonna out your cards, like it doesn't make any sense. So although Nibiru could be good, right? It could be like the best hand trap of the format, I still wouldn't play this card in Kashtira. I would go as far as to say that. Even if it was game winning, I still wouldn't play this card in Kashtira because it has the potential to backfire, and I definitely don't want that. I don't want to walk into an event with cards that could just backfire on me. So I wouldn't play Nibiru in Kashtira. I mean, I did, and it backfired, and I've tested it many times, and it's just not the card for this deck in my opinion. Next is Ash Blossom. So I want to just talk about like all these cards together. Might as well put my imprims here too. So level 3 tuners are really good in this deck. Ash is just generic, but I think it's good to incorporate some level 3 tuners. Being in those simplified game states, or having those certain hands that you can go Barone and then still combo is amazing. Ending on a Barone and like a Fenrir or Shinra era is literally your game. It's game winning. So I will try to incorporate level 3 tuners into the deck, depending which ones are good, right? I feel like Ash, I feel like will always be good, so I'll incorporate it into the deck. If not, I play Mourner. If you need more hand traps, you play Ash and Mourner. Now, again, like the guy that I said that got second at Euros, which realistically he should have gotten first, he played a bunch of hand traps, and he explained how he would go into Barone often, and how hand traps are really good in the deck. Back then, at those Euros, since Kashtira was the best deck, he didn't main Shifter. So because he didn't main Shifter and he was expecting to play against a lot of cash, he played cards like Effect Veiler. And in my opinion, it's just not a card that I want to play in this deck. Same thing with Ogre, because they conflict with Shifter. And again, like I said, I don't want cards in my deck that conflict. And in my opinion, these cards will always conflict. Veiler could be decent, I guess, because you can normal summon it and go Omega. However, again, I just don't like the fact that under Shifter or Dimensional Fissure, or you just cannot use them, and I never want to put myself in that scenario. If I have Shifter, I want to just Shifter, right? So again, if it's not a tier 0 format with a deck that's just focused on banishing cards and they play Shifter, I would never put these cards in the deck. And I'm pretty sure if he was playing in another format and he would play the similar list, he would play Shifter over the Veilers, right? So I'm trading not having Veiler for the 3 Shifter. So I would continue playing a level 3 tuner. So I play Ash, it's the absolute most generic one, and 3 Mourner because, depending on the format, I play Mourner. So I wouldn't play these. Now Imperm, it kind of just depends. I mean, this is like a fluff card you can put in your deck. It's a basic negate, right? If you want to fill up slots in your deck. So if you don't know what to put in, just put in Imperm, right? It won't be bad. It won't be horrible, but it will be, in my opinion, mediocre at best. Personally, I like playing cards like Raigeki or cards that are super high impact. I want to have cards that say like, I like having cards that do a lot. I don't really like having slap on the wrist cards, although I do understand the reason behind playing slap on the wrist cards, especially in cash. However, I think Imperm is a card that if you're going first, you're going to have to set. And the biggest weakness of Kashtira being board breakers, these cards are just always coming out when you're going first, and I don't like that. I'd rather play either another hand trap or just another card in my deck. But, if you don't have anything else to put in and you're kind of just trying to figure out how good cash is in the format, you could just throw in Imperm and it won't be bad. Now we have Dai-Fi and talents that I want to talk about. So I think this card in a format where Droll is really good and people are definitely maining it or siding it, playing this card is just amazing in Kashtira. It fuels up your preparations, which you get access to through almost every combo that you do. Being another floodgate, therefore you have 5 floodgates in your deck. If you're playing 2, you have 5 floodgates. Shifter in this going first is really powerful. And most of the time, using Dai-Fi going into an established board is not horrible. So I think this is a card you should think about what the format is and see if it's good in your format. And then talents. The reason why I like talents in this deck is because it can bump up consistency, right? When you special summon your Fenrir, and you get Ash Blossomed, or you get not Imperm, but if you get Ash Blossom, Veilered, or anything, using tactics to like draw 2 cards is like basically a consistency card at that point. The fact that you could use it going second to break a board is insane. And Fenrir usually demands an answer, and that's what I love about the cash cards. Fenrir and Unicorn always say like, do you have a hand trap? So tactics could be really good in the deck just to bump up consistency, because the deck does have a slight problem with consistency. Okay, now let me just talk about some side deck cards, and I'm going to talk about these for now. So back in the day when Gamma was at 3, a lot of people were siding 3 Gamma, if not maining 3 Gamma. Now, like I said before, it's a 50-50 chance you're going to go first or second, right? So if you're going second, you're going to have a 3 of Gamma in your deck, right? And you're going to use it on their turn, and it could be amazing. And then, if you were going first, you could try to activate your spells, and then if they Ash Blossom or do something, you could Gamma on your turn, and that could also be game winning. Now, with the same logic, right, because Gamma's going to be live going second, why not play Delta? Your opponent's playing spell cards, and there are, spell cards are going up, they're on the incline, they're getting stronger and stronger. Why not side 3 of these in your deck? It's another 3 of hand trap that could potentially be a bomb. So if you have the space in your side, why not play a card like this? You could stop branded fusions, you could stop certain broken spell card engine cards, right? You could stop utility cards. So I think this is with the same logic as people played 3 Gamma, because they knew it was going to be live, your opponent's going to use a monster effect. I think the same reason you play 3 of these in your side deck, because your opponent's going to use a spell card, whether it's going to be a consistency card, whether it's going to be a floodgate, whether it's going to be anything. So I think these cards and playing cards like these in cash is actually just insane, because your 1 card pushes are huge, right? So you lowering their ceiling drastically by hitting their powerful spell cards could really get you there more often than not if you have a starter. Bell, I think it's kind of worth talking about just because it's a level 3 tuner. Like I said, you want to play some of these in your deck. Going Barone is very easy with just a simple any cash monster normal summon. Getting to Barone is huge. So this is another level 3 hand trap you could play. Now to talk about Judgment, like I said, this deck can just special summon Fenrir, use effect, right? And then you can get hand trapped, you can pass, and then your opponent still needs to solve this issue. This is an issue for your opponent. So if your opponent didn't Gamma this, right, they still have to deal with a Fenrir that banishes a card, and not only banishes a card, during your turn, they will search another card. So it's not like a deck that's like Sprite or Pearly, where you need a bunch of cards to resolve to eventually get to your disruption, to eventually get to your boss monster. All these cards are boss monsters, and you're kind of playing Protect the Castle with Judgment, right? With all your little cash cards like your Fenrirs and your Unicorns. So summoning Fenrir, or putting up the Shangri Era, and then setting Judgment could be game winning, right? You're just protecting this card because next turn you're gonna win the game if this card sticks on the board. So I think Judgment is like a engine card pretty much, and what I love is that it's a generic trap card that says if you go first, this card goes in. So I play 3 of these cards that I know for a fact when I go first, they will be inside my deck. And I think it dummies down side decking. It makes it so you don't have to think as much. Sometimes what people do is they tend to overside. They tend to play cards that are very, very unique, right? So they come up sometimes, or you put them in and your opponent kind of plays around them. This is one of those cards that your opponent just cannot play around. Even if they wanted to, they can't, right? It's a counter trap that stops anything. So the fact that it makes your cash cards live makes it super important, and an amazing 3 of side deck card, and specifically Kashtira. Now, same thing with anti-spell. D-barrier, if the format's good, you can play it, but it's like a floodgate that I cut the 3rd anti-spell for. Anti-spell, I understand that it can backfire, and I know I'm kind of contradicting myself before. However, you can still draw your cash names and play the game. And like I said, if you could make your Fenrir survive or Unicorn survive, you could kind of win the duel. It's kind of the same thing, right? Because if your Fenrir survives, and it's more likely than not going to survive if your opponent can't play spell cards, right? You could win the game from there. And although it can potentially backfire, that's the reason why I play 2. So you reduce the chance of seeing multiples. However, it does protect you from what you lose to, and you have to know what your deck is weak to and be prepared for that. So although it does contradict what I said before with like Nibiru, I think this is not as harmful as Nibiru and giving yourself a token. Although you can crash the token, I still think it's like weird, and this has definitely been amazing for me, and we'll continue to play it because spell cards in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh are just getting better and better. Konami keeps printing better and better engine spell cards, and if you could stop those, you could definitely win the game. Now going into the extra deck, just to talk about some mandatory cards. Shanger Era, I think, to be honest, I played two in a non-Nibiru format where people are just playing a bunch of control decks and not playing Nib. I could see myself playing two of this and doing other combos where you end on double Shang and a Fenrir, right? You end on double Shang Fenrir and you lock 2 zones, and then when you banish a card, you can lock 2 more to 3 more zones. So in a format where you see Nibiru, you definitely just play one and you don't even try to go for that combo. However, if you're going into that format where there's no Nibirus, I could see myself playing 2 Shang and going like the full super high ceiling combo. But for now, 1 Shang is absolutely perfect. Sometimes there are a lot of duels where you don't even go into it. Mandatory card, I would consider this card. I think this is one of the best cards in the extra deck. The ability to pop a card, banish from your grave is crazy. Like that doesn't make any sense. I feel like this card shouldn't be it's like cheating when you're playing it in this deck, right? The fact that you're banishing your Theosis, adding back a card, popping a card, you know, and doing that twice is crazy. Another thing is that it fuels your preparations, which is very, very, very important, and that comes up very often. Flare Metal, Big Eye, I need to talk about. Flare Metal is just good in time situations. Also, if you're playing against Falanderies or decks that like need to link climb like crazy, you could end on this on top of your end board. And although it does look like fluff, even though it won't game them, it puts pressure on your opponent to out this card. And Jeremy Mitchell talks about that, and he says that, you know, sometimes he would go into Flare Metal and he would just, you know, make his opponent play weird, right? Because they want to out the card. So I think although it's a fluff card and it doesn't look like it's doing anything, it could put like tremendous pressure on your opponent. And then Big Eye, just a generic rank 7, one of the better rank 7. The pool is pretty small for the rank 7s, but it can help you, you know, bait and negate. Most of the times that's what it does, right? You bait and negate. But, you know, if it resolves, you could take a card, link into an SP or something. So Big Eye is just amazing for that. Really good going second. Now, I consider this card a pretty much engine card and a staple. Almost every time, I think for the longest, there's going to be a couple top meta decks that use the graveyard. And this card being a double DD Crow, right? You could use it on your turn and you could use it on your opponent's turn, is pretty crazy. So I would definitely keep on playing this card. It comes up way too much. I want to note, I don't play the Raid Raptor and the Zephyros, the Blackwing Zephyros. And I feel like I should talk about that a little bit. I know some other people are seeing success with it, and I don't think it's bad. I think it's good. I definitely think it's good. However, playing an additional brick in the deck can backfire, right? In the course of a long tournament, it could potentially backfire. The fact that you take burn damage, sometimes it's not good, right? Because you could like lose in time or whatever. I know that won't come up often, but I just think that combo plays into almost everything. You could kind of play into Nibiru. You force them to Nibiru, but that's not good. I'd rather force them to Nibiru in another way, which I will show you later on. And you know, you get to free up an extra deck space. And the overall picture is that I think it's good, but I think the way that I'm showing you is just better overall for the general public, right? So I feel like this is a deck that you could just take and play with these ratios and these theories, and you could do really well with, rather than like trying to play more combo cards and like another brick in the deck. Which again, I don't think is bad. I just don't think it's the right the right way to go about it if you're new to the deck and stuff like that. Now Zeus and Typhon, I consider these cards again staples. You never want to cut these cards. Typhon comes up almost all the time. You just have to be aware that if you have the field spell, you can't use the effect. And you know, Zeus, since you play a bunch of rank 7s. And then Barone, I talked about it before. SP, I consider these cards almost mandatory. If you don't have an SP, it's fine. I think you could play Donner, or you should play Donner if you don't have SP, but you know, having a Link 2 to just out generic cards is always going to be powerful. Just having that ability to get rid of a card in your extra deck is huge. So I definitely think it's, you know, if you're going to go to a nationals, right, and you're planning on winning, you should pick up yourself an SP, and you should have this card in your side deck. It comes up here and there, but when it does, it's, thank God you had it, right? Now it's time to talk about these cards. I think this is genius. I think this is amazing. I think these slots, might as well just put this card too here. I think these slots could not be better slots. There's nothing that you can play that's better. There's no other rank 7s you can play. There are no other Link monsters you can play. The only other cards you can play are the Odd Eyes package or the Super Poly targets. Now, Super Poly, it really heavily depends on the format. But the fact that these cards come up so often and you're already playing this, right, because you want to outskill drain, is crazy. The fact that you have this high ceiling combo with 2 cards and you don't use Birth is crazy. Using an additional 1 to 2 cards could be game winning, and ending on the additional disruption all through your extra deck is crazy. If you remember Sanatoli that played Rescue Ace, he did the whole like Cybers combo in his Rescue Ace deck, and he won a YCS or something. The fact that you have access to additional disruption or a combo in the extra deck that raises your ceiling or lets you see more cards in your deck is really powerful. You know, the fact that the cards that you're playing with the 5 cards in your hand, you're getting access to a combo that ends on additional disruptions to what you were already going to end on is very powerful. And I think this is a great discovery. We didn't have this before, and now that we do, it just bumps the deck up a little bit. So the Odd Eyes package was good for me. It was good for me for the YCS. It came up here and there, but realistically, this comes up way more often. And I think the Odd Eyes package is good. Like if I had 20 cards in my extra deck, I would play the Odd Eyes package, but this just comes up more often. So now I want to talk about some combos, right? So I could show this combo and the main combo I do now. So you're gonna special summon Unicorn, use the effect of Unicorn, and get your Birth. Here you're gonna use Birth. Well, you're not using it, you're just normal summoning. Use Fenrir effect to get your Scareclaw, right, to get your Extender. And then here you could overlay to your Draco Sack. Now Draco Sack will use the effect, specifically detaching Fenrir. I mean, it's not that important, but you detach Fenrir, you get 2 tokens. You could link one of them into Link Spider and the other one into another Link Spider. And then here you use these 2 to go into your G Golem, right? So this is in your hand. You use G Golem to reborn the Link Spider. Now you use these to go into Heat Soul. Now, what's cool that we did here is that we put Heat Soul here, Draco Sack here, therefore boosting him by 500, which is cool. We get to draw a random card from our deck using Heat Soul, and our opponent could like Nibiru us here, right, or earlier, which is fine. You know, we haven't used Birth, and even if they Nibiru us and these cards leave the board, we could just Birth, bring back our Fenrir, summon our Scareclaw, banishing the Unicorn, and we still have like a 1 disruption with Birth, and that's not bad. You know, the fact that you only use 2 cards and you still have the rest of the cards in your hand is really powerful, right? Even if they nibbed you, it's cool. You don't really care that much. I mean, you care, I'm not gonna lie, but it's not like the end of the world, right? Where before, with the previous cash combos, if you were getting nibbed, it was hurting a lot. So what I personally like doing is in this scenario right here is if I have no other extenders whatsoever, I still use these cards to go into Appaloosa. And it's fine. I think here it's a fine spot to just proceed, right? To summon your Scareclaw, banishing, and then summoning your Fenrir. And then here you could go Shang if you wanted to. And then you have Appaloosa for 2. Now, what will happen most of the time, because realistically, you're not only gonna have one card on, you're not gonna have no other card. If you have Rice Heart, or you have Theosis, you could also do this, and it does happen very, very often, is I would just summon my Scareclaw here, right? You summon your Scareclaw here, banish your Fenrir, and then you check here for anything, right? If they have nib, they're gonna nib you, right? Which again, it's fine. Even if they nib you, it's cool. But if they don't, you're just gonna go Appaloosa for 3. And then you could summon back your Fenrir, summon your Rice Heart, and then use Rice Heart, and then still go Shangri Era. And then you have, 3 negates from here. And the fact that you have your Fenrir to banish a card is really powerful, because it could kind of like protect your Appaloosa. Now, it's also fine if you just leave the Heat Soul, but I always want to play through Nibiru, especially in a format where Nibiru is really relevant. So I think leaving it here is just not good enough. I think it's definitely not good enough. And what people tend to do is they tend to use their Scareclaw here and then go like IP or SP here. And that could be cool too, right? You could end on Heat Soul. With these going to SP. This is also a fine line. Depending on, I mean, if you know what you play against, then you could choose. Then you can go SP, banish your Unicorn from the grave. So you could fuel your preparations for next turn, if you have access to it. And then you could birth, bring back this. And then if they try to nib you here, you could just SP banish these 2, right? And then end phase these come back. So that's one line you could do, and then you could draw an additional card. But in my opinion, if you already have cards like Ash Blossom in your hand, right? If you already have like the Extender in your hand, you don't really need to end on SP, in my opinion. I think it's just better to go Appaloosa, protect yourself from Nibiru, and then, the only thing that you're missing out on is one draw, right? But what are you hoping to draw into if you already have the additional disruptions, you already have the extra hand trap or the extra extender? So if I have absolutely nothing else, no other extender, no other hand trap, no other card to set, then I will go for this combo, right? There are a lot of reasons why I think Kashtira is one of the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! And why it will forever be a really good deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! As long as it doesn't get hit. The deck plays 3 Prosperity. I think Prosperity is one of the best consistency cards you could possibly play in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. The fact that it lets you, if you don't need to use your extra deck, you could just banish the top 6, banish the 6 cards from your extra deck and then see the top 6 cards. It's like a even better Upstart Goblin. The deck now cannot play Pot of Desires. It used to be able to play Pot of Desires because with a Rice Heart, you could reattach anything that's banished, right, that you need. So I think Desires is not a good card for the deck right now, although because it doesn't hit your consistency in the mid game. And, hitting your mid to late game could kind of hurt because the deck goes into the mid and late game pretty often. So for that reason, I think Desires is out of the question. I think Prosperity is just the best way to go. And the Heat Soul combo kind of does contradict the Prosperity, which I really don't like. That's why I like going Appaloosa to for sure get a disruption, or go IP and then continue with your Kashtira plays. Because in my opinion, I think ending on the Kashtira cards is the best thing you could possibly do because of the reasons why I stated earlier. Now, moving forward, although I won't be playing this deck for the tier 0 format that we're in right now, maybe I'll play it again in the future, but I want to note I chose to play Kashtira in a format that everyone thought it was bad, everyone thought it was cope, because it hits certain criteria that I need for a deck to hit to be considered meta relevant, right? I talk about this a lot in my Yu-Gi-Oh! Tips series if you watch on my channel. And if you just follow the certain tips for deck building and you look at certain cards like, a deck needs to have alternative win conditions, it needs to be good in the mid to late game, it needs to not only worry about, the 50% chance of going first, right? Like what if you lose the dice roll and you have to go second, right? There could be decks that are extremely combo heavy And if they lose the dice roll, they could lose, right? Because their deck is super built to go first. So I like decks that are Swiss Army knife. You know, they can go first, they can go second. They have inherent win conditions. They have inherent deck advantages. Like Kashtira monsters are all big beat sticks, right? They're all big bodies that you just slap on the board, and even if you get hand trapped, you still have a beater. That's an advantage, you know, rather than playing with, like, let's say the sprite cards, which require multiple effects activating to eventually get to a big monster, right? So I have certain theories that I implement in my deck building, and you could see this across all my deck lists. Like, I use the theory of one-ofs, I use, you know, certain things, like I said before, alternative win conditions. And I think if you follow these tips that I state, you could implement them in almost any single deck, and you could make your list even better than what it is, right? So that's the one reason why I played Kashtira in the past, and now I'm playing a different deck that I personally think is one of the best decks in the format. People are calling me delusional. You know, people called me delusional before when I played Kashtira, but then I started winning locals, started doing really well, and then now everyone's playing Cash, right? So that's kind of crazy. So we'll see what's going to happen in the future. Maybe I'll play Cash again, but if you guys have a list or you have any questions, you could join my YouTube, and I don't really know how it works yet, but I could assist you. I can make a personalized video if you want, and we could talk about your deck. And I will answer any questions you have about your deck. Maybe it's another rogue deck. I tend to play rogue decks. I don't really play the tier 0 best deck. So with that being said, that's it for this Kashtira Masterclass video. If you have any further questions, let me know. If I could give 3 tips to a Kashtira player, they would be: number 1, do not play cards that conflict. Don't play cards like Nibiru, even if it's good in the format. I promise you. Don't play cards like Nibiru. Don't play cards like Ogre. Don't play cards like Veiler. Even though they could be great in the format, if you're main decking Shifter and Dimensional Fissure and stuff like that, you definitely don't want to play cards that could conflict. If there's a format where you do not main Shifter, then you could look into playing those cards. But this deck, you know, Shifter's too good in this deck, so there's no reason not to play it. Number 2 is play cards that are more board breaker style and that allow you to play the game rather than stopping your opponent. So by that I mean, let's say it's a format where you could side draw. I personally think it's better to side cards like Shared Ride or cards that allow you to play the game, like Call by the Grave, right? Rather than cards that stop your opponent. In my experience, I think Kashtira as an engine is probably one of the strongest engines, going first or going second. And if you just have access to your deck, you're able to break through any board or establish a really, really amazing board, right? So I think playing cards that allow you to play the game are far more important than stopping your opponent. With that being said, I also think you need to have a side deck ready for going first. And I think the best card you can play is Solemn Judgment. Playing cards like, you know, that allow you to play Cash, those are the best kinds of cards for Kashtira. You know, just letting you get to your Fenrirs and your Unicorns is amazing, right? If those cards could stick on the board for more than a turn, you're winning the game. So keep that in mind when you're playing the deck, and don't really focus on trying to go, you know, crazy combo, Shangri-La, locking zones. There's no need to do that right now. You just play simple, and playing simple will really get you far with this deck. And I think that's the main pro with this deck, is that you could afford to mess up. You could use your interruptions poorly. You know, it could happen, right? You can misplay in the course of a long tournament, and the deck can really carry you. So I think that's amazing. And for the people that say this is just a Shifter deck, you know, you draw Shifter or you lose, I think they're so wrong. I've done well at so many events where I've seen Shifter once or twice. You know, I've bricked with Shifter more times than it has won me games. I'm gonna be honest. So don't let even if Shifter gets banned, I think this deck will be amazing. Put it that way.